Hey there, welcome to the live Support Ops Hangout. I'm your host, Chase Clements. This is a show that helps you deliver the best support experience possible to your customers. And on this one, it's time for a brand new series, which we're all really stoked about. We're going to be looking at the ways that support can basically help make your company's product better. We've talked for a long time about support getting how to get a seat at the table to help make some decisions, if I say that right. Now we want to kind of, most of us have gotten a seat at the table, which is really great, so we want to talk about how we can make the best use of that seat, and this series is the first step in that one. So before we get started on that, you should meet the rest of the crew. The full crew is back this week. It's pretty exciting since, it's going to be a fun topic. Let's start first with Carolyn, who is again in New Digs. How are you?
I'm in New Digs. I moved in. I'm obviously still moving in, which is why this looks like a bomb went off. But yeah, I'm in my new apartment in Nashville.
It's exciting. It doesn't look like a bomb went off. It looks very minimalistic.
It's like, really? That's very generous.
Well, I think the bomb is off camera.
Okay, that might be the case. Yeah.
And then next up, Chase Livingston from Automatic. How goes it?
Going very well. Glad to be here.
And then last but certainly not least, the wise and I don't know. Wise and always eating. Yes, there it is. The wise and always eating Jeff Vincent from Wistia. How's the food?
It's popcorn and it's great. Two notes. One is I like that I've been in the same digs for however many years we've been doing this, and yet it still looks like a bomb went off behind me. So thank you, Carolyn, for that. And second, the last time we did this show, I had 6 inches of snow outside, or however many inches of snow. And today we're back, and I'm sunburned. And it's 65 degrees out. So welcome to the Northeast via my description.
I love it. It's like y'all just skipped over spring for some reason. Or like went to spring and then fell back and then jumped over into summer. I don't know.
But we're all in agreement around here that we'll see snow again before our time is up.
Seems likely.
And we should point out too that Chase Livingston, I'm pretty sure, has not moved since our very first episode. I mean, that Clemson dollar has been there in just about every single show we've done.
Yeah, I'm pretty standard in that regard, I guess.
I think the blanket back there is new.
It might. I think it's been there. Maybe you can just see it better today. I don't know.
If nothing else, we're consistent, which is pretty good, I guess. All right, so let's talk this series. Like I mentioned, we're going to be looking at ways that support can help make your product better. A big part of that for today's specific topic is looking at how to provide feedback and feed forward, as Carolyn says, along with some actionable data that actually pushes the product and the design team to be better. So we're going to be looking at that. It's going to be fun. Let's start, since we mentioned Carolyn there, let's start with her. Carolyn, so when it comes to, you kind of gathering up all the things that your customers are hearing, all the things that your team is hearing, and getting, once you get ready to pass that all along over to the product team, what's that process going to look like? How do you know what things should get passed on and what things just are boneheaded, oh yeah, don't listen to that particular piece of feed forward?
Okay, so are we talking specifically about product improvements, or are you including bugs and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so let's focus on product improvements. I mean, bugs, that's one of those things where your product's always going to have bugs. It's just one of those where that's just how it is. And sometimes bugs can be inconsequential. But yeah, let's focus on pushing the product forward.
Okay. Yeah, so like all things, this is always in flux. We're always trying to throw out and recreate or optimize this process. I will say that I'll share how it is at this particular moment. We struggle with this a little bit in the sense that basically every new approach we take ends up turning into sort of a, since we have the bomb theme going, explosion of suggestions. If we open, our user voice page has a few product suggestions that that bubble to the top that, are clear signals. But then there's a really long tail of, really often smart things that we either would love to get to but won't, or don't plan on ever doing because it doesn't fit in with our vision or whatnot. So we do take those votes really seriously, especially at the sort of the ones that bubble to the top. Although that's a little bit self-fulfilling, because if they're at the top, then people see them first and then they vote for them. We are trying to have a little bit more process around sharing signals in the product. And we're just recently sort of distinguishing between like design adjustments versus actual product changes, which I think in the past we've often had as these like design improvements either fell into bug category because they were sort of confusing and causing somebody to think that something was going to happen that didn't end up happening, versus like a product improvement. And so we started making that distinction, which is a little bit helpful. But yeah, for the most part, at this point, I'm not all that heavily involved in the process. I do some advising and give comments, but we have sort of a product liaison for each product area, which is at the moment arranged by payment type. So we have an individual plan, like a free plan, and there's one product liaison, Kelly, who does that, and she works directly with the product creator on that team, and she goes by both data and intuition. Is the TLDR. She says, we have this many requests for these 3 things, and also, like, I just have this sense that this is the most important thing to work on, even if it's not the highest priority. And either that's because, or even if it's not the most frequently mentioned, either because it feels higher priority because it's something that supports a vision or a goal, or because it is, for some other reason, central to the experience that feels really key. So she kind of tries to supplement one with the other in terms of data, and her just sense after talking to customers for every day for a long time and reviewing data and just having her finger on the pulse of what the product team is prioritizing and working on, and what their goals are for the quarter.
So how do you like having a liaison like that for the different plans? Like, are you seeing, I guess that makes sense because you would see different suggestions and things depending on the plan that person's on, right?
Yeah, yes and no. Some things are the same. Everybody wants Instagram, so that's across the board. But some people have different needs. Different customers have different needs, obviously, and people who have access to different features request different things. So we have multiple product liaisons, and they are just super closely in touch. And so they do a lot of comparing notes as well.
So Chase, when we're talking about Automatic and specifically Jetpack here, what's it look like for that process? Because I know Jetpack is a smaller team inside Automatic, but I imagine that you working with the product team there is kind of similar to how Automatic as a whole views it, right?
Yeah, definitely. So we, always, I guess in a similar way, usually have at least one person who sort of acts as a liaison, as Carolyn was mentioning, between us and support and then the actual product team for Jetpack. A lot of times that's like a rotating person for each Jetpack release. So since we work in either point releases or major releases with Jetpack as a plugin, a lot of times, usually there'll be a release lead on the product side, and then a sort of a liaison or a support lead, if you will, from our side as well, and they sort of work hand in hand and make sure that both teams are aware of what's going on. And so if there's any docs that we know we're going to need updating with the release, that those get updated, and vice versa. If there's a major bug or a major feature request that we're seeing crop up more and more in support, we're definitely letting the product team know about that. And I guess we have sort of the added advantage that Jetpack itself is all open source, so anybody can access our GitHub repo and post issues and things like that. And so that we also have a couple people from our support team whose job it is to sort of go through daily and sort of groom that and manage that. If there's duplicate feature requests, merge those together, that kind of thing. But that's sort of how we manage community-based feature requests and that kind of thing, is just have somebody either tag on to an existing issue or create a new one for the feature or whatever that they're interested in seeing in Jetpack.
So since it's open source now, I imagine you run into the same problem that all of us do. You've got so many different feature requests coming in. At least with it being email feature requests, it's kind of less public. But with the GitHub issues, that's pretty public and pretty open. So how do you work through those and pick out the ones that are likely to happen, the good ideas from there, while still being, I don't know, like nice, for lack of a better word, to everybody?
Yeah, so it's definitely you have to be a little more delicate for sure, because it's people are going to be quoting your replies and it's searchable for everybody to see and that kind of thing. So you definitely have to be careful in how you word your replies and that kind of thing, whether it's something that's just not possible and we're not able to implement, or it's something that we're going to put off for a future release, or just something that for lack of a better term, doesn't fit into the scope of Jetpack or whatever, and so just as something we're never going to do, at least for the foreseeable future. You sort of have to, delicately either let the requester down, or explain to them why they might be getting an answer that they don't want to see. And so I guess that's the nature of the beast with having an open repo on GitHub and that kind of thing. It's not uncommon in the WordPress world. A lot of plugins do it the same way, and WordPress itself obviously is open source, and so it happens every day on the WordPress project itself. So I think it's just something that folks get used to, and the folks that are having to make those tough decisions get used to the best ways to let people know the response that they need to.
Jeff, what's it like? We've talked before about how you're moving into more of a product role now. What's it like? What's going through your head when one of your support team leads brings you the feature requests that you're seeing, the ideas that customers are having, and all that? Like what's at that moment? What things are you looking for to make sure that what they're bringing you is good stuff that needs to be passed on?
Always the tough ones. I think the most important thing on that, okay, two things. One is what I'm looking for, right? And then the other one is like what someone I think in my role should be looking for, or like what we should be celebrating about this. I just want to, because it's the first episode in this series, make sure that we cover like what's so amazing about this. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Can we also cover what your role is?
Sure.
Because you don't have the same role as you used to.
Sure. Okay, let me cover the first part, and then let me do that second. And I'm also cognizant of the fact that now that I'm the one that's talking, I have the red thing about my battery, and I have no charger. So you lose me in the middle. Sorry.
Talk fast.
We build this like product and experience for people. So it's so amazing. Like as a product organization, what we wish we could do is talk to people all the time. And I feel like companies, like every organization I've talked to, forgets about the fact that there's a group of people who talk to customers all day, right? And there's maybe multiple groups. It's support people, it's success people. Like there some, depends on the size of the organization, but every product person that I've talked to is like, oh yeah, it's just all about the input from the customer, and I wish that we had more time to put against that. And it's like, well, you've got people who are doing that all the time. How are you getting their thoughts, their feedback in? And it's like, oh, well, yeah, I mean, we have this like form that they fill out, and we kind of like got to put friction in place to make sure that it's like very, we can keep the volume down. For me, what's most important is that people can share what they're learning, right? But also that what the thing that they're sharing, almost more than the solution, is the context. Like how did this come up? What is the customer trying to do? What kind of customer are we talking about? Because the solution, like to Carolyn's point, there's a very long tail of like a variety of different solutions that actually could probably all be coupled under like a single problem umbrella. And it's the product team's job, if you want to build a great product, to only solve a few problems, but solve them extremely well. And more, because people are signed up for like 50 different products, you've got to solve that problem in a way that doesn't require the customer to like learn a whole new system of how you solve that particular problem, and like really intricate steps and like checkboxes to make sure that you check or uncheck, because otherwise it won't work, because it's just never going to work for many of our products anyway. WordPress may be an exception, because if you don't have a website, then you don't have anything. But so to Carolyn's point, my role is product management. I run product management for us. That really means, I guess the way that I think about it is it means two things. One is that we're releasing the right things, and two is that we're releasing them the right way, and that means like time and process-wise. So I try to manage our development pipeline, right? Like how things get out the door and how long it takes us to get things out the door. And then I also manage like what goes into that pipeline. So how do we choose what we work on? And do we end up releasing things that are valuable? And the second, like the process-wise, the process one is not really that influenced by support, although having a really tight feedback loop with your customers means you're more comfortable putting something out there that's not perfect. But the other one, the one about like what do we work on, should be heavily influenced by support, and that only comes from hearing from our support and success team members like all the time.
Yeah, that's one of the things where I tell everyone the analogy that, well, not analogy, the story of Southwest back in the day. Southwest decided that the thing they were hearing most from customers was that people wanted on-time flights and they wanted cheap flights. That was the big two. So Southwest decided to do whatever they could to make sure that cheap flights and on-time arrivals and departures happened for the majority of their customers. That meant they didn't focus on things like having a bunch of snack services or anything like that. So with those, they were very cognizant of what customers wanted, but they cut out the things that customers thought they wanted, but that they didn't really, at the end of the day, want. And I think that's a good example of your team being, I call it customer-inspired, not customer-driven necessarily. You get that inspiration from customers that kind of help make product design, but you're not focused on, oh yeah, like 50 people last week said we should change this little button to do this instead of that, and we need to add a cute little penguin onto it too. Like, nobody likes, well, I mean, I guess people like penguins, but you don't want penguins in your product. So you should be customer-inspired rather than customer-driven. Jeff, so since we're still on a battery thing here, I'm going to let you go again. So this one came over from Chris from over on Twitter. The question from him was, what's a few best practices to deliver actionable data over to your product team? So when you're bringing those sources in, what are you looking for as far as like actionable data?
So we tend to be. Okay, so Carolyn's question earlier about bugs is, I think, apt, because we tend to be very support-driven in terms of which bugs are causing the most pain, and we do that by a combination of usage and reporting. Like if people are reaching out and saying like, hey, this is really a high pain point for me, then we should probably fix it. And also, if we know people are using that feature all day and they keep having to double-click that one confirmation thing all day, like we should go in and fix it. One less click is just like a way better world for all of those customers. But in terms of like new feature development or like longer feature arcs, like where should we spend our time, I really think a lot of that should be driven from the like higher level even business problem as opposed to from requests from support. So how that normally works for us is we choose an area with which we want to focus, right, and a problem underneath that area. So an example for us is our users and permissions is like horribly confusing, and as a result, it's really hard to like encourage new customers to add the members of their team, which we think would be really valuable. And so being that you have a seat at the table now, if we decide that that's the problem that we want to focus on, a really actionable piece of data that the support person can bring is, here's all the problems that we've actually heard about in the last 30 days from customers related to that segment of the product. And if you're not hearing anything from customers about that segment of the product, then it's not that big of a problem. It's just not. And maybe you're like, doing something amazing and innovative that people don't even realize that they could ask for. But still, if they're not seeing any problems with that, they may not be using it. And then I think the second piece, which is less actionable data, but is more like, I need your voice and perspective, is if we decide to do something and your intuition from talking to customers is this is a really bad idea, that's the perfect time to say, my intuition from customers tells me that's a really bad idea, and we should do something to de-risk that problem. Right? We should do some sort of like small scale release or like testing with people. Are we doing testing? What's up with that? To make sure that this isn't a problem, because every bone in my body from all the conversations I'm having is telling me that this is not a good idea. And we in every feature development team that we have, we've got somebody who's thinking about things in that way. And whenever they raise the flag, it's like a very important thing to take note of.
Carolyn, you mentioned intuition earlier. How big of a how much emphasis should we put on that? I mean, if your support team is saying, hey, we have this actionable data that says we should do X, but there's that one lone voice that's like, maybe not on this one. Like, how much weight do we give over to that intuition?
Yeah, I loved your example of customer inspired versus customer driven. We have a very similar concept, but sort of the opposite, like data informed instead of data driven. I'm sure everybody uses that phrase. Yeah, we go back and forth on this a little bit because it goes two ways. On the one hand, there's the intuition of things just don't quite feel right, or this particular thing doesn't feel quite right, despite what the data says. I talk to customers not me, but like as a customer service person, I talk to customers all day long. I'm just telling you, like, this is a bigger problem, like this is causing more stress, or this is something that we really should fix, or this is just something that's not really a problem, like you're optimizing for data, but like I can just tell you that people are happy with it or whatever. Like that absolutely does have a seat at the table in that conversation. And the other way, like to go back to the example, I was waiting for Jeff to say the word checkbox, which it didn't take long because to go back to his old example of like, even if like customers are just clamming for a checkbox to do this one thing, like you have to also have the intuition on the product side to say like, either this is not the right solution to the problem, or there's a different problem that we need to solve for this, that, or the other reason, or however that goes. So the unprecise answer is it is important. I would say my experience lately is that on the details, data should kind of win. Intuition is great, but especially as our team gets bigger, it used to be that there were three of us, and the three of us knew absolutely everything, and anything that you pulled from our intuition or brain was probably pretty representative. That's not really the case necessarily anymore as the product has grown and gotten more and more complicated, and we have these sort of spin-off products, and on the details, this versus that, we're leaning even more into data. The area where intuition has become even more important for us is the things that are a little bit harder to measure, like, do our customers trust the product to do what it says it's going to do? Like, if you have, it's hard to quantify that, or, customers feel like this is essential for their business. Like, yeah, you can ask that in like a Qualaroo, but that's the type of thing, especially in the sort of the negative direction. Like if people are just not trusting or not feeling great or feeling like you have, missed the boat on either upholding one of your values or, whatever it is that that a customer service person knows just from that like feeling, that's something that we've been trying to rely on more. And the challenge is that it's way harder to talk about that. First of all, because it's just less precise. And secondly, because it hurts to go into a product meeting and say, like, customers aren't happy. Like that sucks because it feels like you're being negative. It feels like you're, saying bad things about all the hard work that the engineering and product teams have done. And so, I don't know, we're trying to just be really intentional about when we have these things to bring it up in other ways or to develop channels for that type of feeling. So, yeah, the bigger we get, the more intuition gets relevant to the big picture as opposed to the details. But on a small team, when one individual representative, customer service representative, can like pretty much has talked to a pretty significant percentage of the customers who've written in, then intuition, you don't even need data at that point. You can just say, which one of these hurts more? And I would say the person is probably right.
Chase, is that the same kind of feeling you get with Automatic? I mean, that scale there is obviously way more than any of the other three of us. So is it intuition, big pictures there, data for details?
In some ways, yeah. Since there are so many of us and that kind of thing, we definitely try to track as much data as we can, just to back up that intuition. But on any given day, we do talk to any one of us talks to a good percentage of the users that contact us because we're so spread out over different products and that kind of thing. So yeah, intuition definitely plays a part, and we also try to continue to track as much data as we can, and report back to the product team with that data as well, to back it up or to back up our intuition.
What kind of data are you passing on there? I mean, is it becoming more? Jeff mentioned like that form earlier to put a little friction in there to make sure not everything gets through with that signal versus noise ratio. What kind of process is it like there with Automatic?
One of the things we did recently, because we're working on a new version of Jetpack, a new major release that's going to revamp a lot of things, we essentially created several different like large buckets or categories that of problems or requests that we see, and then everybody just went through it and categorized each of the tickets that they worked on in a particular day into one of those buckets, just to see the volume of requests we get per large bucket or category, just to see what the results were and whether or not we were spending time on what we think we should be spending time on, or if the data shows something different, that maybe we should be focused on something else besides what our intuition is leading us to think. Maybe something's more broken than we originally realized, or something is requested more than we thought. And so that was definitely pretty helpful. We don't do that constantly, but anytime we're looking to gather that data, I think that's a good way to do it, at least for us, because there's so many of us working on the product and supporting a product at any given time, is just to sort of collect the data ourselves and then compile that together in some sort of spreadsheet or chart or something like that to present to a product team.
Yeah, we do something simpler with Basecamp. Basically, we've got these buckets of big areas. So when I say buckets, think of like customer ideas and feature requests and all for like to-dos or for export options and things like that. And one of the things that we do is, we tag them in Help Scout, and kind of keep things there. But at the same time, when cases really catch our eye that we can dig in on and get some really good information back from the customer on, those are the ones that we tend to go ahead and get over into Basecamp using some of the tech stocks there. So say for instance, like somebody sends us an email and says, hey, we want I don't know, we want to-do dependencies in Basecamp. Yeah, that's cool. That's a nice idea. That's something that other project management apps have. But a lot of times we'll press in a little bit and be like, all right, well, what are you really trying to do with this? If you did have something like this, what would it be like? What would you use it for? And then we got a nice little story basically with all those emails back and forth that we take and go ahead and put in our Basecamp project for that. That way, doing it that way, we live, breathe, and eat inside of Basecamp all day long. So there's more of a chance that other people on the team will run into those customer emails there rather than opening up Help Scout, which they might do like once a month for their all-hands support day. Plus, it also makes it really nice for us to be able to keep track of them there. That way, when that, in this case, to-do dependencies, if those were to be incorporated in, we have a really nice and easy way to go back to that customer and say, hey, here's this new feature. We think you're really going to love it. Would you give it a shot and tell us what you think on it? Yeah, so that's the buckets thing. I think that really works. I mean, it's one of those where, you can't just go out and like you want to get to those stories in there because actual data is nice, like Carolyn was mentioning. But when you're looking at a new feature kind of thing, you want the stories behind it, if that makes sense.
So I have to just jump in here and say that I think that that's brilliant, the buckets, and we do that to Chase Livingston's point. We do that on a monthly basis. One of the support team members pulls the tags, sure, like the data around like what percentage of issues got tagged with which tag, right? But also what's been really interesting, or at least informative to me, is then assigns out one team member to dive into the top like 3 to 5 and try to pull out like what's actually going on in a few of those tickets. And that has been like that's completely changed the game in terms of the conversation that we have around that data. Because before, if you just say, big buckets, it very rarely changes, right? We're a video hosting app, so an awful lot of the big buckets are around like analytics and embedding. Like those are two huge problems. But then, and that may never change. But then when you actually get into like the sub bullet points under there, and one of the things that a support team member might raise is like, embedding in WordPress is still really hard and really confusing, and a lot of our customers want to do it. That's not a. I don't think any customers would reach out to us and say, "Can you build a better plugin?" But they will reach out and say, "I don't know how to use this existing plugin," and it's our job to identify the fact that if we built a better plugin, we would like obviate all of that frustration for the customer. So that data is like extremely helpful to quantify how much impact making that investment would have.
Yeah, it's something as simple as the WordPress plugin, right? There's so many different things that you could dig in on because do you need to build a better plugin? Do you need to build an easier way inside Wistia itself, wistia.com, to grab some kind of embed link and then post it over in there? Or is that customer living in WordPress all day and doesn't want to have to be bothered to go over there? Do they want to have some kind of menu that pops up in WordPress when they use that plugin and they can select the video? Like those are things that might fall under a big bucket embed that you have. I don't know, 40 tickets in the last week mentioned they want a WordPress embed kind of thing. But now you've got some kind of story that you can go to your product team with and say, hey, here's kind of the ideal use case that we're hearing about, that we've learned about. And yeah, those numbers are nice to have, but here's some in this case, real good actionable stories that you can go with.
Yeah, that's right. I will add that for battery saving technology, I have turned the display all the way down, so I'm just talking to a black screen right now, and it's really disconcerting.
It's okay. It's okay. Yeah. Which, speaking of, I mean, we're at that 30-minute mark, anyways, and this is one of those conversations that we're gonna spread out over at least the next 10 episodes or so. So we're gonna have plenty of time to dig into it. Any last things you want to throw in on this one? Jeff, everyone's just kind of staring, so you're not missing anything. It's fine.
I'm excited about this topic because I think that support is not something where it's like, oh, now we have customers, like we have to have support, and it just kind of lives over in this closet over here, and they just like have to, deal with customers. It's like the stuff that the support team does all day is like an integral part of the service and experience that your customers have, and it should feed back into the product that you build, like that bridge is extremely important.
I'm nodding enthusiastically.
I'm giving you a nice big thumbs up. Preach it, brother. I love it.
Is Chase Livingston just sitting in the same spot?
I'll throw a thumbs up in there. How about that?
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, so that's our take on the very beginnings of this one. Let us know what you think. Hello@supportops.co is the place that you want to be, or you can hit us up on Twitter. We're at supportops there. Like I mentioned, we're going to be on this for a couple of weeks, so if you do have any questions that you want us to tackle around this product topic, make sure to drop us a line. That way we can get them in. And by the way, thanks, Chris, for the one on this one. Yeah, other big, so 2 programming notes, and then we'll go. One, next week we're going to be off. Sorry for this miss a week, have a week, miss a week. It's just kind of how schedules line up. Sometimes it just happens. So thanks for being understanding on that one. And we won't say we apologize for any inconvenience. We're sorry. That's it. So we're going to be off next week, but then back the Monday after that. Second programming note, if you're on Google Music Play, I think that's what they call it, Google Play Music, I don't know, whatever it's called. We're now on there as well. So if that's your podcast streaming app of choice, then look us up. I'll also make sure to have links to it in this week's newsletter. Yeah, we'll have links to that, show notes, all that fun stuff. Those will be up shortly. Yeah, supportops.co, that's the other one that you need. Thanks again for listening, and until we see you again, have an awesome week.